Today on AGetc, we start off the day with the ribbon cutting for 2 new greenhouses at the Kansas Wheat Innovation Center. Then Brad Lubben is back talking about farm bill discussions when it comes to the conservation programs. Next, Mark McCully with Certified Angus Beef explains why, when cattle prices go up, beef prices are soon to follow. And we'll end with Dr. Blevins and Master Silversmith and metalworking artisan Greg Darnall. Greg shows us how knowing the anatomy and conformation of your horse's mouth before applying a bit. Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com. This segment brought to you by Kansas Regenerative Medicine. Your stem cells, your health, your life.
My name is Aaron Harries. I'm Vice President of Research and Operations for Kansas Wheat in Manhattan. Today we're in a new greenhouse complex, an expansion that was just completed a couple of months ago. This is a doubling of greenhouse space that we have at the Kansas Wheat Innovation Center here in Manhattan. This facility originally opened in 2012 with 10,000 square feet of greenhouse space, and through the efforts of Kansas wheat farmers, Kansas State University, the Economic Development Administration of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and the Dane Hansen Foundation, we were able to expand and double our greenhouse space within 5 years of moving into the facility. So it's a really exciting time for farmers. This increases the capacity of wheat research that can be done in this facility. A lot of K-State sponsored wheat research projects, which are also funded by Kansas wheat farmers, happening in this place. So a lot of genetic and research advances in wheat recently, more to come. And it's nice to know that a lot of that's going to happen in a facility here in Manhattan, Kansas, that farmers built. The Wheat Innovation Center is a really unique public-private collaboration. It's unique in the United States and in the world in that you have farmers providing such a large investment of their checkoff dollars for this $15 million facility, but that collaboration with the land-grant university, Kansas State University, with the federal government, with the Economic Development Administration and U.S. Department of Commerce, and with the private local foundation, the Dane G. Hansen Foundation, which is in northwest Kansas, not here in Manhattan, but they recognize the work being done here would benefit the wheat farmers in northwestern Kansas. So a lot of pieces of the pie for support, but I think it's a great example that a lot of people will probably follow. We've had a few successes already as a result of the Wheat Innovation Center being here. We've leveraged funds that we've raised for this facility to help secure some of these grants. We've been able to secure a USDA grant with $500,000 matched by USDA dollar for dollar because of funds that we had in our Wheat Research Foundation. So we've raised $1.7 million in funds to fund a research foundation that will help fund the research in this building. And by stepping up to the plate with those funds, we were able to get the support of USDA to help support that project also. This facility is important to wheat farmers because of the advanced wheat technologies that are being used here. It typically takes a little bit longer than a decade to get a new wheat variety out of Kansas State University or other seed programs to a Kansas wheat farmer. And our goal is to speed that process up. And some of the techniques we use in here can cut almost half the amount out of that time period. We're also using some more advanced techniques to not only speed the process up, but improve the quality of those varieties that Kansas wheat farmers can grow. And most of the Kansas farmers that have been at this facility appreciate it as something tangible, a solid investment for their research. We've had almost 10,000 people through this building in the first 5 years. So it's a powerful representation of the Kansas wheat farmer willing to invest back in their own industry.
Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
ValleyVet.com, ValleyVet.com, Valley Vet Supply.
Ag Promo Source is a unique group of marketing specialists with one mission: help your ag business grow. Each affiliate has their own area of expertise, and they work together to bring you advice, products, and services. To get started, visit agpromosource.com. Ag Promo Source. Together we grow.
Welcome to the Jerry Thomas Gallery and Collection, where we feature my renowned artwork, frontier military, and Native American artifacts. In the painting behind me is Scouting the Trail. Two scouts overlook the Smoky Hill River Valley just north of the famous Monument Rocks, which are internationally renowned, as a column of 7th Cavalry parade north of the river. On this point, two scouts rode in a circle, and there were 18 cartridges found up there, and that meant that they usually were warning of impending danger and firing off their weapons. One of those weapons I feature in the gallery, a Spencer weapon, which we featured in the painting. Very unique and very honored to showcase this to you.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Wheat. Learn more at rediscoverwheat.org.
Hi, I'm Brad Lubben. I'm an Extension Policy Specialist from the University of Nebraska, and I'm in Manhattan as part of the two-state Kansas and Nebraska Farm Bill educational series here. One of the issues that we're talking about is conservation and the potential funding and the potential support for conservation programs that continue in the Farm Bill. The biggest conservation program that we're paying attention to is probably the CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program. It's been around since 1985. At one time, it enrolled as many as 37 million acres across the country. But we know it's been shrinking in the last decade as well, and it's now down to around 23 million acres. The cap has also shrunk over time, and it's currently at 24 million acres, just in time for lower commodity prices, which frankly might encourage some producers to look fondly at trying to re-enroll or enroll more acreage back in the CRP. Well, we can't do that unless the cap is raised, and so one of the fundamental policy questions is about where that cap should be at. But if we think the program should get bigger, as some constituents concur, then you got to find a way to raise the cap. And if you raise the cap, you've got to find the money to pay for the new acres that would be enrolled. That's one of the budget challenges. There's also a concern, or at least a question, about the payment rates on the CRP. By definition, they are a function of cash rents for cropland in each county. And in fact, under continuous enrollment provisions, a landowner can enroll acreage for high priority practices at that going cash rental rate. Well, cash rents tend to lag behind actual crop prices and profitability, and thus cash rents in the CRP have been growing even as cash rents or even as crop profitability has fallen off the last couple of years. That leaves us a little bit concerned that the payments in CRP are somewhat out of line with current crop economics, and that has some suggesting that in order to better balance those two, maybe the CRP rental rate should be reduced. A proposal to reduce it by 20% so that the maximum payment is 80% instead of 20% is one option on the table. It's quite possible that reducing payment rates might be a way to find the money to also increase the enrollment cap. And so that's certainly one option that we might watch for in the CRP. There is one other area of particular note in the conservation programs, and that's the funding for working lands programs, namely EQIP and CSP. That's the Environmental Quality Incentives Program and the Conservation Stewardship Program. Both of those have received increased funding over the years since they were introduced in the 1990s and the early 2000s, and that funding continues to grow. But the question really tends to be about the rate of growth in funding. How much budget support is there to find new money to grow them faster, versus is there any possibility that we might consolidate the two as a way to save money? That's really the question ahead for the working lands, and between the CRP and also the working lands, that's the biggest part of the conservation portfolio.
Sure Crop Fertilizers was started by my father, Don Sherman, and my mother, Shirley Sherman. Family business that started in the 80s. We predominantly focus on plant nutrients and what we can do to give growers better responses with the fertilizer dollars that they do, and what we can do to make those things work better for the grower. We're based out of Seneca, Kansas. We work with growers in their soil analysis to figure out what they need, and then we can put those in a blend that gives them the best results, and so that we can deliver that direct to their farm so that they have those nutrients where they need them, when they need them, and so that they can apply them in a manner that's very efficient to them and works well on their planting systems and what they're doing. Sure Crop Fertilizers has been around for a long time. We always say we're big enough to take care of everything you need, but yet we're small enough to do it quickly. You can get a hold of us at 1-800-635-4743. Our website is surecropfertilizers.com, and you can can always email me at Corey@surecropfertilizers.com, and with any questions you have, we'll be glad to answer and work with you.
Welcome to Western Kansas Wildlife Travel Center, right here in Oakley, Kansas on I-70 at exit 76. I-70, after all, is America's Main Street, and we're right here on Main Street for you. Now that I'm an Oakley resident, I still come in almost every day, and I sit and listen to the conversations of the people around me. You know, the guys who are talking about the big elk they just bagged, or the folks who are taking their kid to college for the first time. People just traveling up and down the highway. Real people, just like you and me. And they find just what I find here, real people to serve them. There's history, there's scenery. We hope you'll stop and see us soon. Welcome to Oakley.
This segment brought to you by Sure Crop, liquid crop nutrition delivered right to your farm.
Cattle prices go up, beef prices follow. Cattle prices go down, beef prices remain. A rancher might wonder, what gives?
A common question we get from cattlemen is they know the price of fed cattle that they're selling to the packer, and then they walk into a grocery store and see a price per pound that's significantly higher than the price they sold those fed cattle for. And we get that question sometimes of what's the disconnect?
Mark McCully says, don't always assume retail price is driven off the price of goods. There is a cost for everything in between.
From the time we sell, say, $1.20 fed cattle to the time the packer is then processing those and the costs associated with all of that, to the pieces and parts that they sell on out through all the channels of distribution to retailers and then ultimately to the consumer.
Those steps create the great eating experience the consumer craves.
The best example is as we look at kind of how that $1.20 fed cattle can convert to something that as you walk into a grocery store and maybe find a $25 filet mignon.
A 1,400-pound steer produces a 900-pound carcass that only yields 14 pounds of tenderloin, just a few pounds that can command high dollars at the counter.
It represents less than 2% of the total weight of the carcass, but contributes, 7 to 8% of the total value.
That's important for cattlemen to keep in mind while they make genetic decisions about their herd and decide which traits to emphasize.
The demand signals are still really, really good. And as we've increased the quality of the herd, what we've seen is the packers' ability to have more high-quality product, more choice, more Certified Angus Beef brand, more prime to sell. It's allowed them to pay more for all fed cattle because of the rising tide, if you will, of quality, and how that's sent a very strong signal back all the way through the system.
Premiums paid for quality remain strong. I'm Bob Cervera.
Hi, I'm Randy.
And I'm Paul from PFI.
We would like to personally invite you to stop by PFI, home of Boot Daddies.
PFI is America's Western store, covering over 50,000 square feet.
Over 25,000 boots.
Visit Saddle City with the largest selection of saddles and tack anywhere.
A huge selection of hats at Big Spur Hat Company in PFI Town.
And choose from the best brands of clothing and accessories for the entire family.
PFI, located on Highway 65 at the Battlefield exit in Springfield. And I'm not kidding.
As fourth-generation farmers themselves, Heinen Brothers Ag Service understands the risk and rewards of farming. So when it comes to quality aerial and ground application, fertilizer, ag chemicals, and anhydrous ammonia, call Heinen Brothers Ag today, 800-760-4964.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Corn. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Hello and welcome to Horsing Around. I'm Dr. Chris Blevins at Kansas State University Veterinary Health Center. Today, joined here by a very important guest here. We have Mr. Greg Darnall. Mr. Darnall is a great gentleman and speaker we're going to have, an educator about bits and how the bit potentially could affect horses. And I think that's where we're going to go with it. Just tell a little bit about your biggest interest that you have as you kind of evolved through bit making and education.
Over the years, Chris, from start to finish on this, my primary goal and interest, not only as a producer but as a horseman as well, is the preservation of a horse's mouth. Obviously, if I do my job correctly and build good, safe mouthpieces and bridle bits, the preservation and the longevity of that horse's mouth stands a better chance. The second part of my endeavor is always to try to educate people about what the conformation and oral cavity, or the inside of a horse's mouth, is like, and the parts of it that are affected by those mouthpieces that we build.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, as you mentioned, is just the conformation of the horse's mouth. What kind of things, when you start talking about the conformation of the horse's mouth and how a bit could affect that, what are some things that maybe even riders and owners should really be paying attention to when it comes to that and trying to pick a bit and those kind of things?
Obviously, before we ever bid any horse, we want to do a physical inspection.
Yeah.
Whether you're there, Chris, to help and guide, or whether they're doing it on their own, we're primarily we're interested in buckle flap, the interdential space, which is that space between the canine and the premolar. We want to make sure that those those interdential spaces have nice sharp crowns on them and that they haven't been damaged. Always, if a horse has a physical problem, I'm going to rely on you and your expertise to help me with those things. But the physical inspection, if I don't know they're there, I can't ask for your help. Tongue is the other thing that we're going to look at. Has it been cut? Has it been lacerated? What do we need to do to avoid that tongue if it has been?
Yeah.
Palate is one of the third areas, that area that runs from the incisor clear back to the thorax. It's got a hard bone underneath it. If that's been damaged or lacerated, we want to know about those things before we ever get ready to put a bit, which is a foreign object, in their mouth.
And, you know, whenever you're taking and thinking about a bit and you start talking about tongue, like even there's been some horses just doing a general exam that have a lot of scars on their tongue from what I would perceive potentially as being a bit, maybe. Depends on what kind of things they put in the mouth. But
there are several ways that tongues get lacerated. Usually the owner is going to deny ever having pulled on one. So
yeah.
Obviously you have to read between the lines. Anytime that tongue's been lacerated, as you know, that is a weakened place in that tongue. So obviously, in the selection of a mouthpiece, we're going to pick a mouthpiece that doesn't further injure that laceration.
I'm Dr. Chris Blevins with Horsing Around, and we'll be right back.
My name is Bill Meredith, and I farm about 7,000 acres. We raise about 150 head of longhorn cattle. It was real frustrating for me to not be able to have my hands on it. When I'd come down in the morning, almost cry because my back was hurting so bad and my memory was so bad, and I'd been to Mayo's clinic feeling like it was nothing was happening as fast as I'd like to see it happen. My land guy come and pulled up beside me and he asked me how I was doing. I told him I wasn't doing worth a darn. He was telling me about this treatment they were doing down there in Manhattan. Anyway, we come up here and got this treatment, put some in my shoulders because I couldn't bend my head like this. I finally started getting my memory back, and I'm able to do about everything I was doing before, maybe more. I went outside and raised my hand and praised the Lord, you know.
The new Better Horses Network is worldwide, presented by Lucas Oil, featuring worldwide radio and TV with iconic hosts like Al Dunning, Sharon Camarillo, Ernie Rodina, Lindy Birch, and Craig Cameron. With American Cowboy, Horse and Rider, Brushy Creek, Cavenders, and Ride TV. Worldwide radio and TV, the all-new Better Horses Network.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission. Progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Hello and welcome back to Horsing Around. I'm Dr. Chris Blevins at Kansas State University Veterinary Health Center, and joined by a real special guest here, Mr. Greg Darnall, a bit maker and bit educator from Texas. And we were talking a little bit about tongues and those aspects, but probably even more important to that, can you go through a little bit of kind of the evolution of horses or the difference of horses when it comes to their mouth and structure?
Really important thing, Chris, and we'll go back years ago in the 15th, 16th century. We had two basic types of horses, the draft horse, the big-footed horse, and then the Arab type horse that was smaller and more refined. Ironically enough, even today, there was a very consistent element within a horse's mouth, and that was this interdental space. From the 16th century to today, the width or space from side to side on the interdental space has changed very, very insignificantly. However, if we look at the difference between our cold-blooded horses and our Arab types, it's going to be the structure in the mandible and the depth of the mandible, or that space below the tongue, that is the important factor. The width is not going to change that much, other than your colder horses are going to be less sensitive, have more buccal flap, and have usually a bigger or larger tongue. That helps us determine mouthpiece-wise, the more delicate the tongue and the less space it has below that tongue, how we're going to accommodate that to allow them to salivate, move that tongue, and keep the mandible relaxed while we ride them.
Yeah. You know, and I think whenever you start thinking about that too, then, whenever you're developing bits, it's that makes the biggest aspect when you're thinking about the horse, I suppose, in trying to fit the horse to certain aspects depending on what's going on. What about like riders? What kind of things do you usually kind of ask on that aspect or to be thinking about for riders?
Great question, Chris. Obviously, no two horses are alike.
Yeah.
Nor are two people alike. So basically, when we talk about horses, we talk about that marriage. Mm-hmm. If you've got a good wife, you're going to be happy. If you have a bad wife, you're not going to be happy. Yeah. The same thing exists with the equine. It is that marriage, and it is a mode of communication. Today, we raise nice horses. We have quality horses. They're smart enough they can be educated. They do not have to be dominated. It is that mode of communication that either allows us to be good horsemen or just horsemen.
I think that is excellent advice and good information when it comes to looking at the aspect of a horse in general. And, you know, and I guess what do you think is maybe one of the biggest, like, pet peeves or things we need to make sure owners really get from trying to pick a bit? Because there's a lot of bits out there.
We have two basic options on this, Chris. We have the professional sector of the market, and then we've got the you and me that work within this industry, and yet we're not making a living training horses. So the optimum thing that you and I need to think about and convey to our customers is that we're not professionals. Yeah. If we are allowed time and consistency, we can create good habits and don't have to be horse trainers to be able to accomplish those same goals or ideals.
You know, and I think that that's something that we always need to remember is that we're professionals and we're always going to learn something, I think, from each other. I've learned a lot from you, and I think that's something that owners need to continue to remember too, is everything will always change and we can always do better.
My most fun part of any talk is the fact everybody thinks they learned something. I always leave learning more than the people that come to listen, and it is a never-ending open book that we deal with.
Well, I sure appreciate you coming and talking here, and we've learned a lot from you. Check him out on his website at gregdarnall.com. Get some great information from there. Talks in different places. He's even going to come to the vet school and talk about bits to the students and to other practitioners, so really appreciate you coming.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Chris.
Yep, thank you.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com.